today's image. So this is when I took my mum and dad away for the week. I went to Dunwich. So I took quite a few series of photographs of this lovely heath, and because it was obviously just a couple of weeks ago, the heather had just gone over, but there was still very much a strong hint of that lovely mauve, pinky mauve colour in the heather that was still remaining, and the ferns were beginning to turn, and the silver birches were looking lovely and bright in the sunlight, and they were obviously a mixture. The leaves are beginning to drop, but there's still a scattering. So now that we're entering into autumn, and obviously we're going to start to enjoy the lovely bright colours in the trees, and obviously it's a brilliant time to study trees and twigs and branches. So I took loads and loads of photographs. Using my husband's camera, which is brilliant. It's really brought out. I'm really impressed with the colour quality of this new camera that we've got. Very high resolution. So I'm hoping, I've been quite inspired actually. There's some really lovely pictures, and it's not far from the coastguard cottages at the Minsmere Bird Sanctuary, National Trust Sanctuary. So that's where I was located. So I've got lots of lovely references. So anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to start this study. We're going to start off with doing some mark making. So it's quite a complicated illustration. So we're just going to give it a rough feel. So I don't expect you to, there's quite a lot of information to get in here. So I don't expect you, it's up to you how much time you want to spend on it. I'm planning to probably try and just do this as a nice rough sketch, and hopefully we'll get it all finished today with a bit of luck. Okay, so don't worry about exactly where all the branches are. It's just to get a rough feel for it that we're after. Okay. As for scenery or perspective wise, we've got a little bit of a 50-50 split. Okay, so we're going to have to be a little bit careful. If we were doing this as a painting, I'd be thinking, right, am I going to bring this down so I don't get too much? Just think of the spacing on the time. If you ever use this is just a study, so it doesn't matter so much. But if you were going to do this as a painting, you'd have to be a bit careful about this space here and this space here being equal. Okay, because it's normally the 50-50 split is usually a bad thing. But we've got lots of lovely interest the way this is travelling and coming across. If you want to warm up first, what I'm going to do first is say, right, okay, I've got my picture. I know that I want to have probably just under half a split for my heather in the background. Okay, so I'm not worried about the background yet. So I've just drawn a really rough line. Okay, and you could just roughly say, right, okay, down here, we've got one of the main trees. Okay, so I'm just really roughly scribbling that in there. And it goes off into that direction here. And I don't need to put too much detail. And then over here, this is where the second one is. And I'm deliberately holding my pencil so that I can't control too much where the branches go, and I'll just think, right, there's one there, and then I've got some more here. So you can see it's really scribbly, really rough, just to give you an idea, because we're going to be going over the top of these marks. But I find it helps to warm you up, and I know if you're not that confident about going straight into using watercolours, it's a way of sort of practicing and saying, right, okay, how is this going to work for me? That one there, and then it's got another little bit that goes out there. That needs to be probably a bit more major, so I shall block this in a bit more in a minute. So that's as much as I've done at the moment, and then I'm going to get a bit more confident with what I'm doing. So that's just a normal HB pencil. And now the next step would be to put in some ink, or I'm going to start off by actually, you can use a combination. You can use a combination of the ink pen that you used last week. You could use watercolour pencil, or I've actually got a charcoal stick. Okay, or even a Conte stick if you wanted to, because that's something that you've not used that's new. So where you know where you want the dark shapes to be, I am just going to wiggle that across like that. And just think, right, okay, I'm just going to, and then I've got, oh, there's so much to go on here, haven't we? There's so many dark ones. And then I'm going to hold this on its end because we don't want that to be too much yet. Oops. So all I'm doing is just where I know I want to have some dark branches, I'm just putting 1 or 2 in. I'm not putting them everywhere. And then I'm going to add some wash in a second. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to define this trunk more in the foreground. We've got double actually, haven't we? We've got that one, this one here, which has a bit of highlight against it. And there's the one that's behind, which has another little wiggly bit. And then you've got a dark, lots of scrambly bits at the bottom that you need to do, and then there's this shadow here. So when we get the chance, we'll probably put a bit more ink into that. But at the moment, I'm just, you could do, I mean, I happen to have my pencil in my hand, but what I might do is just, you could do this with your biro, with your, well, anything really. Because we want to get some darkness in here to show we've got the shadow, and it's all scruffy undergrowth. So in order to prevent me from having, oh, you can't see my hand, I'm holding my pen at the very end. So it's stopping me from being too controlled. And we're only using the reference that I've sent you as a guide. You know, we don't, because this is a quick sketch that we're doing. Okay, my branches aren't in the exact position of the original, and that doesn't matter. Okay, as long as the sketch that you're beginning to develop that you're happy with, what's on your page is more important. Okay, the photograph that I've given you is a reference and it's a guide, but it doesn't matter that, you know, some of your branches might look different, or the spacing that I've got here is not as exact as the original reference. It doesn't matter, so don't worry. Your work doesn't have to be a carbon copy of the photograph. You can have branches in a slight different angles or going off in a slightly different way. Don't worry about it. Okay. So now I am beginning to do some hatching with my black pen, just to show that there's some really dark branches that we can see, and there's another one that hooks out there, and I just flick at them in a random way, going down, and then it goes back into the white Silver Birch. So I'm going to do a few creases just to suggest the texture on the Silver Birch, and then I'm going to leave it quite pale down the bottom here. Oh, and there's another branch just spotted. I've got that one and that one, which is a bit thick, so I need another one in the middle. And then down here we've got one that's coming like this, and up there, and that's catching the light, so I'll have to do a light bit for that. So you notice that some of these angles that I'm doing are quite straight and they don't look very tree-like, but it's just a rough shape, so don't worry about that. And what we'll do is we'll break up the horizon a little bit because it's too straight, so I'm just going to do a few little squiggles to show that it's heather. So I'm literally tiny little tufty squiggly ups and downy marks, because we don't want that horizon to look like a solid line. So I've just done lots of little squiggly wiggles. Funny little squiggles. So you can, now that we're beginning to get the colour on, you can begin to enjoy yourself and start to use your combination of charcoal, watercolour pencil. I don't know, you could use anything sort of strong and black, Conte stick, anything, as long as you get the blackness going. So what I'm going to do now is try and tighten up the branches down here. So we've got a really dark one, oh that's that dark one you've just done there. And then we've got, oh yeah, we've got a light one here. So I'm just blocking it in, a little bit of a gap between the two. So that one is going to have to come lower down like that. And then there's one coming up through. And we've got shadow going that way on that one. I've not gone too much at the top yet because I'm going to be doing put some watercolour on the top for the leaves. So what I might be doing is working in bar over the top, because if I use, when you can wet charcoal, but obviously it will start to look quite dirty and dark. So I haven't gone to, I've been beginning to be a little bit more sparing and using it in certain areas. Okay. I'm now going to get my china plate in a minute. I'm just going to do a few more marks. So I'm just holding my, I'll hold this at a tip. So we've got that one going like that. And we've got so many going this way, so we could just flick some out, hatch them slightly, and go back. Because there are so many branches. And we've got this one, which is dark. So what I'm looking for when I'm trying to sketch these trees is I am looking to emphasize, so the light is shining across here. So if I want to do this as a pen and ink and make this look three-dimensional, I want to have an outline that's dark on the right-hand side of the stem trunk, and then a pencil on that side. So we want to try and create the impression of three-dimension side. And I'm deliberately leaving a gap, so I want to leave all this white bit of paper. Okay, do my wiggles going down, and I'll do the other branch behind it, wiggling in a minute. Okay, so if I press hard or scribble hard on this side, lots of wiggly shapes and all nicely random squiggly shapes going off everywhere and rehatching. So I'm doing it all on the right hand side, and I'm not doing much on the left hand side, and this will help my trunk catch the eye and look more interesting. So I'm not putting even. Right, so on this branch here, the light's constant, so you could almost effectively shade most of this in around here and flick it around. I think sometimes the main thing is the more you do it, the more you think, oh, you know, because there's so much going on here, you know, you don't have to, you know, I'm getting a rough feel for this, but if you look at what I've drawn and compare it to the original, you can already see some differences where mine's not the same as the original. So, you know, please don't worry about it. The main thing is what we need to work on is strengthening this drawing up, which we will do eventually, because this is going to be more important. Okay, so usually if I'm trying to attempt to sort of to do a tree, I will be looking at the main structures of the main big trunks of any tree and trying to get the main feel for the main branches, and then anything else is made up, because we'd otherwise we'd be spending forever trying to keep up with everything. Okay, so this one goes around the back and connects to that one, comes around here, connects around there, and then so this one needs to be dark. That's a dark one there. So I'm just doing enjoying doing lots of little squiggles, and I've just seen the shape here that branches out. Okay, now that this is beginning to work, what I can do is I'm just going to lift out with my rubber a little bit the pencil marks where I thought a little bit too heavy. So I don't want it to get too heavy, just to keep it looking nice and lively. Okay, so it's still too light at the moment, which is what I want, because we want to have the freedom to add bits in later if you want to, or textures in later if you want to. Okay, because we've got some dark bits around here. I might do a few little squiggles with that, just to give it a little feel. Okay, if I had more time, I could probably spend more time doing the Silver Birch marks, but we are just doing this as a sketch today. So that was looking quite good. This one's still got a long way to go, hasn't it? So I'm going to move over to this one and try and bring this one up a bit more. So I'm looking at this and thinking, right, that's light. This is dark shape coming up here. And it is doing a fine line, and then it's coming dark over there. And then there's another one here. And that's really dark coming down there, and that's all coming out of this same branch, which is leaning really severely, isn't it? So I need to rub that out. So I'm just going to block this in. As I say, I'm just using the same pen that I was using in last week's demonstration, which is this Stabilo pen. It's actually quite a fine pen. It's a 0.4 pen, but you could be using a rollerball if you wanted to. Or equally, for doing these marks that I'm doing, you could use a watercolour pencil, or you could use, as you can see, I've got bits of charcoal in my illustration as well. You could use that black felt tip, anything like that, anything you want really, okay? But I just happen to be using a pen at the moment. Yeah, that's why I haven't put too much in, because also when we put water on it, it will also smudge as well. But there's so much dark in this, it won't matter, it'll soften, and then you can redefine the edges again. I'll show you how it works. So ease off on the charcoal and just use a soft pencil, or a black biro if you've got one to hand. If you wanted to do this in a more detailed way, another tip that you could do is that you could obviously spend more careful time drawing the main structure of the trees, and then when you want to preserve your whites, you obviously could mask out with masking fluid. There's a lot of options open to you. This trunk is coming out of the grass. Heather on its Todd. It's just going straight up there. Let's give that a little bit of a slim down. Oh yes, this one's got a nice hook. And that can be a really nice way of making trees look more interesting, was to really look for those little kinks and little flicks. So again, the shadow is on this one is on the top, and the light source is getting underneath because it's got all the foliage coming across. Okay, and then this is just a sea of fine twigs, and they've got lots of options for tackling that. And then this one is coming across here, like that. You could also try, just for an exercise, not bothering the pencil and just trying. Sometimes it's good as an exercise, just to say, right, all I've got is my black biro, my black rollerball, and I'm just going to dive straight in. But I think, and it's a good exercise to make, and then you have to work with what you've started to draw. Even if you realise, oh, I've made a slight mistake, as long as you know, make it look right, it'll work. There we go, and then we've got shadow, again, shadow here, which is coming down like that. And then we've got some really light tufty bits. So all this is shadow here. So what we can do is, just to suggest the mounds of the heather, is I'm doing tiny little dashes to suggest these sort of random mounds of something. And I'm just going to do some flicking for shadow. So because the light source is hitting this angle and coming across, my thinking is I'll probably do a slight angle for the shadow, for some slight hatching. Okay, which will probably, I'm not going to go too mad with the hatching because I'm going to go over this with watercolour. So I should still get that a shadow of the hatching, but I know that this particular pen will run slightly. So I'm not going to kill it too heavily with black at the moment, because we're going to be introducing a little bit of wash to it. Okay, so that's the reason why it's not jet black. So I just want to have that broken edge, and then there's a, so I'm just randomly at certain points doing some little flicks, and I'm working at an angle, okay, for general tufts of grass or just anything to give it a little bit of little spots of texture, just sort of scattered. And there is a shadow here of a dark line, so let's just put that in, and again do some flicking, and quite quickly you can start to okay, so all my shading is going this way, so I'm trying to suggest the heather a little bit, and I'm just doing squiggles and wiggles, little tufts here and there. So where you see, so what I'm looking for is a clue. Yes, it has gone dark, isn't it? Okay. So I'm looking at this dark ridge here, and then there's little tufty bits occasionally, and at the base of the tree and round the back. So bits like that would be important to put in. And you've got like a little dark patch there. Okay, that's the bottom of the trunk. There's a couple of little dark bits in there and behind there. This bit here is corresponding to this bit around here. Okay, so but I'm not going too mad with the hatching, but as I say, do it a bit sort of random, or it's lots of little dots and dashes, so that the brain tells us that all this undergrowth is thick and going off in all directions. And then I'm just doing a rough scribbly scribble for this sort of shape here. So it's very rough, just sort of, and lots of little dashes and dots all over the place, and little tufty bits, just to suggest that it's all undergrowth that we're looking at. And then we've got this strong shadow here, so I'm going to do another line here, and then we've got some shadow here. Which I'm just sort of doing as squiggles and lines and in random directions, because I want to make sure that it looks very much like sort of rough undergrowth. So I'm going quite random in my directions, so we get this sort of effect. And then I need a dark shape here to show that this tree is very much planted in the ground. And there's that nice shadow. And then we've got this nice shadow here. And then we want to make sure that's perhaps a tiny little bit darker, ready to put some colour on. So I'm going to start to introduce some washes of water onto it now. And we could probably, if you wanted to, introduce a little hint of colour as well. So the sketchbook that I have is pages are relatively thick. I'm going to use not one of my botanical brushes, just a standard sort of round brush. So I'm going to suggest a little bit of this lovely colour in the heather. Okay, so I'm going to pick up some quinacridone magenta, or a nice pinky colour, and then I'm just going to soften that down. And what you can do is, rather than mix a solid colour, you can start to travel with your colours. That's something that we haven't done before. So what I mean by that is, we will just as we do with acrylic painting, we can just slightly change the colours. So have a colour that's the quinacridone magenta, perhaps with a little bit of green added to it, so it looks a bit greyish. Have the quinacridone magenta on its own. Have a little bits of mauve. And because I want it to look as though it's catching light, I can just water it out as it's pale on the right hand side, and it's a little bit stronger in the centre. Okay. And the occasional bit, I could just tweak the colour slightly. It's up to you, but have a go, have a try. If it's something that you haven't done before, have a go at doing patches where you've got the colour on its Todd, and then you've got the to block that, so I want to keep that light. So down here in the foreground, I want to show that the sunlight's shining on it, so I'm thinking I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to add a spot of pink to it, so it goes more terracotta-ish. So the colour's very slightly different, because if we look over here, we've got the shadow or the light in the centre is actually a bright yellow, or a nice dried golden light. It's actually got a hint of green in it. So what we could do to keep that, it's that sort of dried golden earth colour. So to get that sort of colour, if you add a spot of pink to your yellow, you'll get a nice golden colour. So now, holding my brush flat, and I can scrape this golden colour. I'm scraping it onto the picture because I want to show that the sun light is coming and it's going behind. So I'm deliberately dragging it now. And I probably just want to boost that colour a bit more because that's looking really nice. So again, I'm adding a speck. So this, because I want this yellow to be just off, I'm just dragging it. So I'm holding my, look, I'm holding my brush right at the very edge. Remember we talked about this at the beginning. You've got less control if you hold your brush at the very, very tip. So that's the method that I'm using to drag this colour, this golden colour across, to get this orange light coming across, and perhaps a little bit here. So I've still got lots of patches in here. So remember, if your colour's too light, let it get bone dry, and then we can work over the top again. Okay. But and if you look closely at this picture, you'll see I've still got streaks of white which aren't in the original photograph, but I want to keep the effect of the light shining, and that's why I've deliberately also, again with the hatching and the marking, the brush marks that I've made, I've done it at a fairly shallow angle to show that it's the ground and the light shining across. So I'm going at a shallow angle. So now I'm beginning to, because I want to have some nice marks, I am rolling my brush around a little bit in a random way. So I'm not really in control because I'm rolling it, but that's a good way sometimes if you've got too much paint or want to try and get some interesting marks by doing lots of tapping. So if I do it here, if I'm doing tapping here, I can get some nice textures. And while it's wet, if you want to boost some interest in it, I can just do a little bit tapping over the top with a little bit of a brighter colour. Okay, and then it'll start to settle and scrape, because we want to have this sort of broken look about it. It's really dark down here, so I'm just going to roll again. I suppose it's doodling or trying to flick the brush in all directions. So this brush is really quite dry, okay, but in doing so I'm trying to get texture in my watercolour, okay, so I don't have too much of a heavy mark. And just look, I'm just trying to tap and do a little bit of combination of rolling and tapping. So we're beginning to get lots of nice textures that we can start to build upon and work upon. So the centre here we want to keep light because this is where the sun's shining. Okay, so I'm thinking I'm going to keep my quiniquid and magenta quite light because I want to show that, really try and eke out as much colour as I can in the heather as I possibly can. And then what I've done is I've just added the merest smidge of yellow to it, so it's gone very slightly terracotta-ish, and I'm diluting it so it's not too strong. Just make sure it's nice and sort of pinky, okay? Because we want to keep it light. I might even put a tiny smidge of opera rose in it actually. So I really want to emphasize the colour. Okay, and again, just by going over here. So I'm now filling all this in over the trees. There we go. I might even just tap in a little bit more of yellow. Let's keep it. So I'm really trying hard to emphasize the colour. Okay. So I'm getting some really nice, pretty colours developing. So it's the yellows and the pinks coming through, and you get some really nice sort of tones. Okay. So I've almost, what you're seeing on screen is, is looking actually slightly light or slightly bleached. So when hopefully you might be able to see some of the colours. So if I just flick that up so I don't have a edge. So I'm now beginning to get some nice purples and colours. And I'm going to start to go back into the areas where I want my heather to look dark. So this tonally doesn't really need to be any darker. This can come up a bit more, but we'll flatten it off a little bit and get some more textures coming in. This can be darker and this can be darker. So you could put a little hint of green in it if you wanted to. Actually, it has got a little hint of green in there. Got a little flash there, and a little flash there, and probably tiniest little bit there. But I quite like it just with the yellow actually. Yeah, I prefer it with the yellow. So what I'm going to do is just take that away. I think it's just nice just having it all the golden yellow colours, all the golden colours. So this bit down here is going to be a lot stronger. This is something new that you can try. When you have watercolour that's wet, you can flick with your finger and you can suggest undergrowth and grasses and tufty bits by just flicking with your finger. You get some really nice textures. Can you see that on here? So you can do that scraping like you would with acrylics, but we can do the same with watercolours as long as you do it immediately. Look, I'm just using the side of my fingernail and I'm just sort of flicking. So this one is to go that way. So I'm just using my finger to break it up and make it a bit more interesting. You could use the end of a brush if you wanted to. This bit I want to keep light, so I'm just going to, there we go. But by doing that with my fingernail, I'm not sure you can see that, there you go. I'm keeping the hatching marks going in that direction. Okay, so if I do a little bit more here, so there it is with the brush, and then there I am going over the top of my fingernail because I want that to look as a broken, so it's catching the light a little bit. So there you go. Get a nice dirty. You get nice dirty fingernails. That works really nicely. The texture. You are. But you weren't expecting that today, were you? See, lots full of lovely surprises. So, so although the front here in the photograph, I'm almost looking at black. I don't want to make mine black. I'm just doing stronger tones of my quinacridone magenta with a bit of brown in it. Okay, because I want to keep the colours. So I am using my artistic license to put more colour in than exists in reality. Okay, and now you could, for the odd bit, okay, I'm beginning to flick and scratch, so I start to get nice tufty marks and textures. So I also might go a nice little bit more golden yellow. It's actually cadmium yellow that I've got. And I'm going to go over the top where I, again with the flat, with my brush holding it flat, I am just going to flick across again with my nice bright yellow. So I get that nice golden colour in the centre that I'm after. So this is just my cadmium yellow. Okay. And I'm just going to drag it across into there a little bit. So this is, yeah, this is my cadmium yellow, and I'm just dragging it. Okay. If it goes on too strong, don't worry about it, just let it settle. Okay, and then with a clean brush, just drag it. Okay, and now it's just softened. So there's my foreground roughly done. I am now going to start to work into the trees, and we're going to do some washes. So you have loads of options on what you can suggest for all of this. You could, if you have a watercolour sponge, I've just got a normal sponge, that you can get ones that are like a natural looking sponge, and you could sponge on like this, and you'll get all these textures coming on here. We can use I will be using a brush. You could also use a toothbrush to get the textures that you want, to get the nice thick marks that you can do. So we'll be doing a little bit of that in combination with the washes. Okay, loads of options open to you as to what you're going to use to get that texture. You could even screw up a tissue and blot it if you wanted to. Okay, the main thing that we want to do is not to have solid blobs, just as we've been working hard to get this nice texture and nice colours going on in the heather. Okay, we've got here, we don't want to have solid blobs. They look quite light. So we're going to start off with this nice golden yellow colour, and there's still some hints of greens in the trees, but we could even sort of do some hints of that. Okay, so you can see that I don't have anywhere near enough darkness in branches, but I think we'll put some coloured washes on first before we start to build up the branches to get the depths more. Just to show you, I've got some charcoal on here, so you can do charcoal over with water. Okay, and it'll darken up slightly. There's my ink pen, and you can see that by touching it, so this is just a damp brush, so I can start to define or do strong by doing a wash. Look, just with a damp brush, I'm really darkening down these branches. You see that? So I'm pressing incredibly lightly. Okay, and I'm trying not to be too hard because I don't want to be too heavy too quickly with these lines. So here it is here. So as soon as I put water on it, see, it runs and makes the tree a lot darker. So that's why, look, there it goes. See how much darker it's looking? But what the advantages is obviously you can wash your brush out, is that by doing these washes, you can still see these lovely textures that you've made with your black pen, and that you've got the wash over it as well. So it just really brings up really nice textures in trees. So I'm now going to wipe my plate clean, and we are going to do some washes for the tree, for the foliage in the trees. And we need a golden colour. So I'm going to pick up my cadmium yellow, and then we've got some green tones in there. So I'm thinking, well, we've certainly got some sagey or sap greens there. And probably need to darken that down. And if I had a smidge of purple, because I want to keep all the colour palette working together, sometimes when I'm using tones, if I add just a smidge of quinacridone magenta to my sap green, I get the dull green that I want for some areas of the trees. So I'm sort of mixing up a combination of just a plain sap green. I've got a golden yellow, and then I've got another sap green here, but it's got the quinacridone magenta in it, which has made it go slightly greyish or slightly dull looking. Okay, so that's a good way of thinking, just as we would think if we were doing botanical painting. If you want shadow tones or dark tones, because there's so much pink in this picture, I'd be tempted to use that, so it restricts my colour palette and it keeps the whole painting together, because all the colours harmonise together or work together. So what we're going to do now, just as we were, because we want lots of lovely texture in the trees at the top, I'll start with the lightest tones, which will be the sort of golden yellowy tones, and we're going to have it fairly diluted. And I'm just going to say, right, where do I want the some light patches? So I think, right, I'm going to have one there, and I'm just going to think, well, I'm going to have some nice yellow along here. So I'm just going to tap it. Okay. And I'm scraping a little bit as well, because I want to try and avoid big, heavy, solid blobs. Yeah, there's no white along here, so just by me dragging. Okay, I can drag and flick. Now, where it gets towards the end, it's obviously looking much more delicate. So what I will probably do is start to do a few dots. So I'm just tapping with my hand, because we want to try and start to get some textures. And I'll change the colour to be a bit more green around here. And again, more tapping. Oops, a bit heavy that one. Make that into a nice branch though. The main thing is to try and get some interesting shapes. Okay, so at the moment this is a bit of a solid patch. Okay, so but because we've got lots more branches and things and textures down here, we need to add some lighter bushes. So I'm just going to, this brush is almost dry, but I've just picked up some cadmium yellow, and I'm just going to roll a little patch here. And sometimes, because it's picking up another colour, a bit of green, it's already sort of being contaminated on the page. I'm trying hard to leave gaps. I mean, if this was a more detailed study, I suppose you could even, you know, put the blue sky in, but I'm not bothering on this occasion. But it can be quite useful to use your brush. So this is a dry brush. It's got practically no paint on it now. But where I have tapped and got a few little spots, I could smudge those spots a little bit, okay, to get some sort of texture, okay, to where I like it. And then I can go back to doing some more splashes again. So I've now nearly lost all those lovely splashes, but I've blended lots of lovely colours in the foliage in there. And if you keep tapping in an area, you start to get this really pretty effects. And where it's still damp, it'll start to seep into the layer above. This is looking a bit heavy here. I'm thinking, probably need to be a little bit careful there. So I'm going to break that up a bit. Oh yeah, and I've just dabbed it with some tissue paper. Okay, so if you get a heavy patch where you think, oh, that's killed the texture a little bit, just leave that. So now that looks quite pretty. Now I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to put some more golden colour in. So I picked up my cadmium yellow, which is minutely contaminated with the pink, so it's looking more, nearly looking orangey, I suppose. And I'm just going to repeat the same effect, which is just literally tapping with my brush. So I'm going to get lots of lovely little tap, 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 tapping all over. You get these really pretty little dashes. So you can say, right, I'm going to have some that are a little bit lighter. You can say, well, actually, I'm going to go a bit lighter. Perhaps I want to go lemon yellow or pure cadmium rather than contaminated cadmium. So this is more of a lemon yellow now. Okay. Oh, great, I'm getting splash marks all over my easel. How lovely. So tonally, I can start to think, right, it needs to be a little bit darker in here because we've got some really lovely, pretty textures going on. But at the moment, the weight isn't in the picture at the moment. So I'm thinking I need to get some darker bits down here and a few more. So I'm going to bring the green down and I'm going to contaminate that green with that quinacridone magenta. So just be careful that you don't end up, you don't really want it to look grey. You could even tweak it and make it look more mauve if you wanted to. This is where our artistic license looks in, because we don't want to kill the picture by putting grey onto a picture, if you know what I mean. We want it to still look pretty. So I've got a dark green, but it's a contaminated dull green rather than too strong. I'm thinking, right, I want to build on that darkness here. And I put a bit more there. Can you see it's bringing weight into it now? So I've got a few dark patches and it's bringing a little bit of weight in, which we need in the trees. Yeah, and it goes into that bit there. Right, so now I am going to, we've got lots of wet areas on our sketchbook where we've done these splashes, and a really good way of working with the twigs is I'm now going to hold my brush upside down, and where I've got a hole there, look, can you see I've got a little bit there, and I think, oh right, okay, I can have a branch going through there. You see what I've just done? See that? You could even just drag it with your brush so you can pull through those little spots that you've done. Look, suddenly I'm creating more random branches traveling. Okay, just pulling it through. So I'm just drawing with the end of my brush. So that's another thing, that a really nice way of getting texture, where you've got these little splashes that we've done. If you just drag your brush through, look, I've made some more branches there, and I've still got all the pretty colours, so in the branches coming through. Okay. So now I'm beginning to think, right, I quite like the look of that. I might put some few more dark splodges on there actually, make sure that's nice and broken. So again, always picking up the green, and I'm always picking up magenta with it as well. Just to make sure it's broken. There we are, I've broken it now. So it's not a solid blob. Okay. And obviously you can go on as much as you like with this until you decide that enough is enough. Now I'm going to go back. Now I've decided, now that we've got a feeling for the colours in the composition, we can now decide with watercolour which areas do we want to make darker. Okay, which things do we want to strengthen up even more? We've got lots of lovely texture on our page. We've got lovely sort of delicate spots and beginning to sort of suggest the way our tree is working, but we can start to strengthen up perhaps one or two of these branches. So we can do this several ways. We can start to perhaps pick up our charcoal again. So it could be our watercolour pencil, charcoal stick, it could even be, you know, it's entirely up to you what you want to do. Here we are. So I want to have a darker line there and another one there. And then that's, I want darker. And going down here. So I'm just randomly trying to pull things across, so I'm beginning to get lots of nice markings coming across. Right, I think I'm nearly there.